Welcome to Mocktails and Masterpieces with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra, sponsored by Anthony Shefferly and Associates.
Greetings, ICO friends. Matthew Kraemer here, music director of the wonderful Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. Our 24-25 season is progressing rapidly. We're on to our sixth subscription concert now, which is the one that I've been looking forward to the most all season long. And I'm delighted to welcome to this segment one of our very dear friends, a composer that we've had a wonderful performing history with. Reinaldo Moya is joining us. Reinaldo, good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to work with the wonderful orchestra again.
This is the third work of yours that ICO has performed, and it's the second world premiere. You can tell that we, especially me, are very fond of your music, and I'm just always very eager to get started with a new conversation about what's next. But your very first work with us was several years ago, the Passacaglia for orchestra, and then we came back. It's already been a few years now to discuss, some of these topical issues, which we're always discussing. How can we craft a program or specific pieces that might provide some conversation for us and for our audiences? And so that work was that resulted in Dark Earth, which had to do with the deforestation in the Amazon, which was very big right prior to COVID, right? We just thought that was the most important world event. And then, of course, the pandemic comes along. Now we're moving on to a very different theme, but it was a topic that really kind of, I think, sparked some interest in you. And I'd like to discuss eventually, both works and how the creative germ, kind of began and grew. But the new work that you have, which will premiere on April 5th, is Home, Run Away From Me. And again, this is a world premiere. The idea of displaced people, and you were able to find some beautiful poems and set this as a song cycle. So I don't want to talk about the whole thing. I want to pass it over to you. Tell us a little bit, or a lot, if you prefer, about your new work.
Don't encourage me too much, because then I'll really go on for a while, So so the idea for this piece started sometime last year. You approached me with the idea to put together a piece centering human displacement and refugees and all of that. And this is a topic that is especially close to my heart as a Venezuelan, because Venezuelans are experiencing one of the largest refugee human displacement crisis, certainly of the current era. Estimates range somewhere between the neighborhood of 5 to 8 million people have left the country of Venezuela in the last 10 to 12 years. That's a lot. That's a big number, but it's also, comparatively speaking, a country of about 30 million people. That's a significant portion of the total population of the country. So we as Venezuelans have had to reforge our identity, our country, our memories of our land elsewhere, right? And one of the silver linings, the beautiful things to emerge out of the darkness of the situation happening in Venezuela, is that now people around the world are getting to know our culture, our music, our food, our people, most importantly, right? And so we're building communities and connections around the world, right? And so that was kind of my first entry point into this piece, was to try to find texts that spoke about that from the Venezuelan perspective. And so the two texts that kind of bookend the piece at the very beginning and at the very end are both texts in Spanish by a Venezuelan writer who lived in Uruguay for a little bit, Cristina Galvez Martos. And so those two poems act as a kind of, it's like a framing mechanism of sort for the songs, starting and ending. But then through our conversations and through my thinking, it was important to me to try to find other voices, to not make this piece a Venezuelan piece, just a strictly Venezuelan piece, but try to find the common humanity, the universality in those stories, because human displacement has been a part of human history since there have been people, right? And so through some research, I connected with 3 poems, Refugees by Holly Karapetkova, Earth Presses Against Us by the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish, and then Home, with which is a setting of portions of the poems by Worcestershire, who is a Somali British poet. And so those 3 poems in the middle are all in English. The Darwish is a translation into English. And so I wanted to bring those other voices as well. And the piece is not a political piece. It's not trying to say this country or this government is bad and this is good. It's really trying to center the lived experience of some of these people, what it means to leave a country and to have to find yourself building a new home in a different land, and how that process changes you, and then you in turn change that place to which you arrive.
That's very powerful, Reinaldo. Thank you for that. And you mentioned it's not, we're not focusing on a specific time or a specific country or a specific event even. I mean, that's really what the whole concert was constructed as. We open up with a very sunny work by Borislav Martinu, but Martinu is probably the example in the 20th century of composer who was homeless. He left his native the Czech Republic at that time, right after the First World War, and never returned. He was never able to, especially after the Second World War. Bartók is another one of these. I mean, the whole community in Southern California, an artist enclave of refugees from Europe, Thomas Mann, and all of these film composers that were down there, Schoenberg, Stravinsky. And then on the second half is the Haydn Mass in the Time of War. I just quickly Googled before our conversation about displacement in 1790s, and a whole population of the French were freeing France at the time because of all of the political instability and all of the Napoleonic wars that came afterwards. So it is a huge encompassing human history, just like you said. So back to your work, though, a song cycle. It's interesting because the week after we perform this, I conduct Mahler's Das Lied Wandererde down here in New Orleans. And it's another, is this a symphony or is this a song cycle kind of thing? And so here you're dealing with 5 separate poems, 2 different voices, just like, the Mahler's 6 poems, but very similar in some ways. And I had no intention to do that when I put these 2 concerts back to back with each other. But talk to us specifically about how you treat the orchestra as accompanimental or as actually part of the lead voice in your composition, and how that's married to these vocal lines and these, particularly the text.
Yeah, the Mahler is definitely a very deliberate and clear inspiration for my piece. The moment you say orchestral song cycle, orchestra music with vocal soloists, the mind just kind of travels in that direction. And there was also a little bit of me thinking, putting on my producer hat and saying, we want to, like, it's nice to have to, for the singers to not have to rehearse together a whole lot before they show up. They can learn their parts, and there's only one song where they overlap. So that was just a little bit of logistical thinking there on my part. But yes, for me, that Mahler gives a really beautiful entry point into that, and it's the alternation of the male and female voice to also underscores the theme of universality, right? This is not about a male or a female or any other experience. This is about the human experience. And the one time in that 3rd song where they sing together is to sort of like signal this like otherworldly sound, right? It's meant to be this like super voice, right? That it's they sometimes they sing in unison, right? The same notes together, but the tenor is singing high in his range and the soprano is singing a little bit low in her range. But you just get this kind of blending of the voices to again underscore that idea of the unity. And so that's kind of the idea behind the alternating of the songs. Some of these songs also, the text sort of read to me as fitting a male singer or a female singer more appropriately. So it just made sense to kind of head in that direction. In terms of the orchestra, how the orchestra plays here, I think it's a little bit of both. It's the orchestra is both an accompaniment, but it's also hopefully I think of it as the underworld, right? That the subconscious sometimes emerging out of accompanimental figures into something that's a little bit more present. Or in the case of those middle songs, songs 3 and 4, the orchestra becomes more aggressive and more almost like a machine, right? So especially in that third song, Earth Presses Against Us, where like there's this relentless kind of really powerful. I wanted to almost like feel that pressure of the text, right? Of kind of pressing against people. So the orchestra will do that in the fourth song that starts out very innocently, right? So it's like no one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark, right? At the moment that we take the place of home and we turn it into something menacing, that's when the orchestra erupts into a kind of loud, scary, dark, menacing machine that it's meant to represent the distortion of this idea of home.
So for any of our listeners tuning in they're not familiar with your music, I'd like to share a little bit of that premiere that we did several years ago of Dark Earth. And as I mentioned, we have a little discussion about programmatic ideas, and then you just take that and you run with it. And with this particular piece, recall we were just talking about the news about the deforestation, and you came up with this brilliant idea. Since the Amazon encompasses several countries, including Venezuela, you took some traditional folk music from each of these countries, from Brazil and from Peru and Venezuela, Colombia, and incorporated them in this piece. And kind of the evolution of the work as it breathes and just melds to the next tune and other different segments. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. And we incorporated some visuals on the premiere of this by Mike Hallard. So I'd like to share a little bit of Reinaldo Moya's Dark Earth with you now. Ronaldo, I still remember that premiere vividly. It was fantastic. Having you on hand personally was so beneficial because we rehearsed, get into the nitty gritty, and then you would come back with like, the perfect observations, just a little slower here, or let the music breathe a little bit more. And we just, to be able to play that once, but then also to take it to another orchestra that I conducted and have a second read through of it as well. Just really feel that the music continues to grow and to evolve, and we hope very much the same for this premiere, Home Run Away From Me. One question that I did want to ask you about is, your particular musical language, which, always varies from piece to piece, but, you have certain colors that are quite common with the works of yours that I'm familiar with. In the percussion section, your use of percussion, their use of really complicated rhythms and meters, but making them sound natural and organic, which is difficult to do. So, could you talk to us a little bit about how those, your musical vocabulary kind of help to shape this piece in particular?
Yeah, I guess I can speak about the rhythms first. Yeah, to me, rhythms are a really interesting window into playing with these dance rhythms or grooves or bodily expressions of music, right? That I think help people connect with the music in a body way, right? In a more direct way. But what I like to do is I take known rhythmic patterns and I just change them a little bit so that they still feel fun. There's still an aspect of it that is danceable, but it's a little bit tricky. It doesn't quite fit into regular traditional meters in the same way. And so, yes, it can be a little bit challenging at first to kind of wrap your head around this. Like the music doesn't make a whole lot of eye sense, but it makes ear and body sense. Hopefully that makes sense, right? You can kind of settle into a groove that you do kind of get into it, but then it's changing a little bit and it feels a little bit different. And so that to me again is one of the ways in which I feel like my voice has been evolving in the last few years, like playing with those elements a little bit, but also I do feel strongly about this idea of connecting with an audience in a real way, but not in a way that feels cheap, but in a way that it feels like I'm giving the audience just enough to kind of like hold their hand, and then we go on this strange journey. And Dark Earth was much more directly tied to some of those techniques. I feel like this piece is maybe less outwardly inspired by folk music, and partially because I didn't, the moment you kind of go folk, then you're really specifically placing that music in a particular part of the world in a particular time period, and we wanted to again kind of zoom out and look at the larger picture, even though I mean it's very, very clear that the last movement, the last song for example, is very clearly inspired by Venezuelan merengue, in that has this very beautiful gentle rocking, which is a dance that is traditionally felt in five, even though nobody can decide how to actually write it down. It's a beautiful thing, yeah. And so that one very clearly feels much more directly inspired by my Venezuelan identity, but certainly in some of the songs that from the Palestinian and Somali inspiration, I didn't want to necessarily feel like I was trying to get at some kind of folk music from that area, because like I haven't studied that folk music deeply enough, and I didn't want to fall into some of those tropes because I think those could be a little bit challenging. So there's a little bit of less of that in this piece, I think, but I think the rhythms are still there. The percussion is very much a character in this piece. Like I said, especially in those middle songs, because it does get pretty loud and overwhelming, and it's meant to kind of represent that that chaos and that feeling of oppression.
That's marvelous, Reinaldo. We're really looking forward to this third work of yours, second world premiere for ICO. And we thank you for all of your incredible work on this as it's come to fruition. For us, and for me particularly, new music is one of my favorite things, if not my favorite. There's no history with this work. It's never been played live by musicians before. So we are creating that in the moment. And now to have this song cycle and just a few short weeks, we're delighted for that. So looking forward to seeing you in Indianapolis, Reinaldo. Home run away from me, April 5th, 7:30 at the Schrott, and hope to see all of you there. Haydn's Mass in the Time of War and Martinu's Sinfonietta de la Jolla are also on the program. So thanks again, Reinaldo. Great talking with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Look forward to seeing you all at the concert.
Take care, everyone.